Rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. They are the holy trinity of the most precious colored gemstones on Earth. Their radiant hues of red, green, and blue are the finest Mother Nature has to offer. For thousands of years, pharaohs and emperors, kings and queens have all coveted these beautiful, lustrous gems.
The royalty, the Maharajas in India, the royal families in England, these people have always collected the gemstones because it was not just a sign of wealth, they considered it a sign of power.
These 3 gemstones are true miracles of nature and are rarer even than diamonds. Their timeless beauty inspires love, passion, and loyalty. And with proper care, their durability ensures that they can be handed down from generation to generation. Join us as we travel to remote mining towns, visit the world's finest gem cutters, and discover the secret world of these 3 precious gems. Throughout the ages, rubies, sapphires, and emeralds have been coveted by mankind. Along with diamonds, they are the ultimate symbols of wealth, power, and prestige. During the Middle Ages, they were known as the cardinal gems for their extensive use in the clergy's most precious ceremonial objects. Crucifixes, rings, and amulets all bore these gems as symbols of virtue and piety.
Over the centuries, the big stones are probably the emerald, ruby, sapphire, diamond. Mostly it's due to the fact that they come out of the earth, they're a natural product, and they possess a certain amount of beauty.
Rubies, sapphires, and emeralds are highly valued for 3 reasons. 1, they are durable. They are among the hardest substances found on Earth. 2, they are rare, found in such limited amounts that throughout history, only the very wealthy have been able to afford them. And 3, they are beautiful. The most notable trait of any gemstone is its color, and no color is as vibrant or as vivid as the red hue that emanates from a ruby like flames from a fire.
Rubies are considered to be, by some, to be the most valuable gem of all. And it's probably because it is so rare and it is such a striking color.
For much of recorded history, rubies were valued more highly than diamonds.
They looked to the heavens there and they saw the sun, and they attributed a ruby to the sun. And in India, ruby is called Rajratna, the king of gems.
Rubies were also thought to help with a range of physical ailments.
Ruby, for example, has been associated with blood for thousands of years.
Red stones, color of blood, were very often connected to therapeutic beliefs and cures for various things.
Early civilizations believed the stones would restore youth and vitality if rubbed on the skin. And if worn into battle, as some brave warriors did, they were thought to bestow invulnerability. Once rubies were introduced to Europe in the early Middle Ages, royal families clamored to own as many of the red gems as they could. But until the 18th century, all red gems were considered rubies.
Thousands of years ago, they had no way to identify a gemstone otherwise by its color. So if it was red, it was a ruby. If it's green, it's an emerald. If it's blue, it's a sapphire. They didn't know about all the different minerals.
Red spinel and red garnet were often mistaken for rubies. In fact, it wasn't until 1783 the chemical differences between the gems were discovered. The most famous case of mistaken identity is of the Black Prince's ruby.
In the British crown jewels, and one of the crowns has a very large egg-size red stone that was called the Black Prince ruby.
Wars were fought for this ruby, except it wasn't a ruby. When the gem was examined gemologically for the first time in its history by the gem testing laboratory in London, they took this ruby they discovered it is not ruby, it is red spinel.
Nevertheless, the 170-carat gem still proudly rests on the cross-patee of England's imperial state crown. Rubies weren't the only gemstones believed to have been possessed of magical powers. Blue sapphires once symbolized divine favor, purity, and wisdom, making them the favored gemstone of religious leaders and kings.
You know, they always attributed power to the gemstones. You know, they just felt that these had an influence over people's lives to bring success to them and to kind of shun negativity. So that's why they collected a lot of them.
In ancient India, people believed the earth rested upon a giant sapphire whose rays colored the sky a brilliant blue.
Sapphire is that blue of the ocean or of the heavens. You know, these gemstones have these properties that are reminiscent of other aspects of nature.
While sapphires brought wisdom, emeralds were thought to give the most desired gift of all, life. 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians discovered emeralds in the eastern mountains bordering the Red Sea. They valued emeralds not only for their beauty, but also as a source of eternal youth.
Green gems were often associated with rebirth, regrowth, faithfulness.
Egyptian pharaohs were entombed with emeralds, believing the gems would keep them young in the afterlife.
Any place that you can find emeralds, they would have definitely been highly, highly prized.
When Spanish conquistadors reached the New World in search of gold, they were met by Incans heavily adorned with emeralds and other gems. Emeralds were sacred to the Incans.
The natives told the story about an Indian king who was rich beyond belief and who used to make offerings into a lake. His body was naked but covered by turpentine, and that covered by layers of gold dust. And he would go to the lake and throw emeralds into the lake.
The story was just a legend, but when the conquistadors returned to Spain, they brought back so many emeralds, their value plummeted.
The emeralds that came into to Spain in the 16th century, they came in such great quantities that the price dropped for them.
The Spanish traded their newfound emeralds in India, where they were in great demand by the Mughal Empire.
In the great period of the Maharajas in the Mughal period, the finest gems found anywhere on earth found their ways to the Mughal courts.
Mughal rulers in India, and they would be bedecked with jewels. They'd have, you know, their crowns on or their top hats there with all kinds of rubies and sapphires and diamonds.
Most of today's priceless rubies, emeralds, and sapphires are in the hands of the world's royal families and famous museums. But these days, it's not just royalty who own all the gems. In smaller sizes, almost anyone can acquire one of these coveted stones. But to appreciate their beauty, it takes an understanding of how they form. Gemstones form deep down inside the earth, where magmatic and metamorphic processes take billions of years to shape them into crystals. Although rubies and sapphires look different, they're essentially the same. As magma cools within the Earth's crust, aluminum and oxygen atoms crystallize to form clear corundum, which is the base mineral for both gems.
Rubies and sapphires are the same gemstone. They're both corundums. The only difference is the coloring agent.
Trace amounts of iron and titanium make sapphires blue, and chromium makes rubies red. But there can be several other colors as well.
Sapphire can also be purple, can be yellow, can be pink, can be an orangey pink, can be a whole variety of different mixtures.
Rubies and sapphires are not only pretty, they are also extremely durable. On the Mohs scale of hardness, corundum is a 9, second only to diamonds at 10. But the scale is relative. Diamonds are much harder than rubies and sapphires, or any other natural substance known. But rubies and sapphires are much harder than emeralds, which have a hardness of 7 to 8. The durability of a gemstone is a direct result of how it forms. The more violent the formation, the more likely a gemstone will have inclusions and fractures, and in some cases, make the stone more brittle. All colored gems fall into one of three formation categories.
In Category 1, those gems form under the gentlest of geologic conditions. Then there's Category 2. They form under more difficult geologic conditions.
Sapphires and rubies, as products of volcanic activity, are Category 2 gemstones. It's not uncommon to see inclusions within their crystal structures. Emeralds, however, fall under Category 3.
Category 3 gemstones form under the most violent geologic conditions. And because of the violent conditions under which they form, they are more prone to have cracks and other features that are readily visible to the naked eye in most cases. Emerald is the classic example of this.
Emeralds are formed during intense tectonic activity. For example, when the Earth's crust folds and buckles to form a mountain range. When this happens, trace amounts of chromium or vanadium bond with the clear beryl silicate, creating beautiful green crystals. But when a mountain range is created, a multitude of minerals are forced to mix together. Some of these minerals get inside the emerald as it forms, creating tiny but numerous inclusions.
Emeralds have so many inclusions normally that a poetic way to define the inclusions is by calling them an emerald garden. And an emerald garden may be formed by included crystals plus fractures, which are also common within emeralds and in the gem trade are called feathers.
Inclusions visible to the naked eye are accepted in emeralds, which have the most inclusions of all gemstones. Those inclusions can also be considered the emerald's birthmarks, identifying where it was formed.
It is possible to tell the origin of the emerald by looking at the inclusions. The emeralds from Africa have tremolite needles, which are an amphibole crystal. The emeralds from Brazil may have biotite. So all those are identifiers of origin and are identifier that the emerald is actually a natural one.
It's virtually impossible to find an emerald without some internal defect. But with all gemstones, the higher the clarity, the higher the value.
If you find an emerald, for example, that's typically included, that is fairly free of inclusions, well, that's a very rare thing, and the stone would be quite valuable.
In rare cases, specific inclusions inside an emerald will create desirable patterns, raising the value exponentially. These are called trapezie emeralds and are only found in one small mountainous region of Colombia.
A trapezie emerald is an emerald that has inside some pattern that resembles the spokes of a wheel, and the cartwheel pattern is formed by inclusions of graphite that follow planes within the emerald.
The best trapezie emeralds are deep green and have well-defined rays that meet perfectly in the center.
Most people have never heard of it. Most gem collectors or gemologists have never really seen it. It's something that you open up your book on gemology, and there's the only trapezie you've ever seen. So to actually experience holding one and seeing one is amazing.
Rubies and sapphires can also contain inclusions that result in rare, desirable patterns.
Those needles will produce shining lines of light that have a star pattern, and you will obtain star rubies and star sapphires.
The finest colors and most expensive star gems tend to come from India, Sri Lanka, and Burma.
Color differences will affect the star ruby or sapphire the same way they will affect the faceted ruby or sapphire or a regular cabochon. But the intensity of the star on top of that has to be added to the mix. And very few people I know can afford a star ruby or a star sapphire that is truly transparent with an incredible color, with an incredible star, because they are so incredibly rare.
If you can have a stone that has a perfect star in the center, it's priceless, literally priceless.
The largest blue sapphire ever found is the Star of India. Unearthed in Sri Lanka more than 300 years ago, it weighs a massive 563 carats. 6 milky rays point outwards from the center, inside a deep blue dome. Today, it's in the collection of the Museum of Natural History in New York City. Gemstones of such elegance are extremely rare, but one thing is for sure. Wherever gems are found, there are people who will spend their lives digging them out, so the rest of us can enjoy them. Gemstones are found in geological pockets all over the world, usually in very remote and rugged locations. Sapphires come from Sri Lanka, India, and Burma, to name a few places. But the largest sapphire field in the world is in central Queensland, Australia. The Anarchy Field covers an area of almost 350 square miles. Since the 1870s, dark blue sapphires have been found here. But green, yellow, and even pink varieties are also common. 50 million years ago, massive volcanic activity rained down corundum crystals and other gem-bearing rock across the area.
On a line just on the Tropic of Capricorn here, it seems that the conditions way down the Earth's mantle when these volcanoes were exploding had exactly the right ingredients or conditions in the rock to form the sapphire.
Over time, more layers of volcanic dirt and ash covered the wash, the layer of ancient gravel where the sapphires are found. Peter Brown lives in the township of Rubyvale, where he's been mining Anarchy sapphires for over 30 years.
We've got the basement, the decomposed granite. We've got a layer of gravel and rocks, and then we go up to sandy layers and that here. This riverbed, or ancient riverbed, was laid down something like 50 million years ago. You can imagine the sapphires were blasted out of the volcanoes, dumped on the surrounding landscape, a few kilometres around here, and then with these massive rains, washed into these valleys, and then charged down these valleys as more like big mud flows with rocks and gravel, sort of like you see coming out of a concrete mixer, like more gravelly sort of wash. And the heavy sapphires and ironstone get caught up, and we're looking for those rich little areas.
The mining process is hard work, but fortunes have been made out here.
I went out to Glenalva after a big downpour one day just to go specking, what we call walking around looking on the ground, and just picked up a 40-carat rough one. You go out there and just wander around the bush and you can have a chance of picking up a stone like that. They say, you know, or come to the sapphire field, you could stub your toe on a fortune.
In another part of the Anarchy Field, Ray Richardson runs one of the few commercial mining operations.
We've been down mining this area for about 3 years. We've done extensive drilling through this new area and found this new deposit of sapphires here.
Sapphires are not typically found in a host rock like diamonds. They are loose and occur randomly. Once found, they need to be separated from other minerals. In mining operations like Richardson's, excavators dig down to the wash and remove the gem-bearing dirt. Then it's transported to the wash plant for closer inspection.
It goes through the procedure of washing it. It goes through a trommel which sizes the material. We only wash up to 15 millimetres over that, because in this area there's not a lot of big sapphire. So the rest of it's discharged out through the trommel, and then inside the trommel it's all scrubbed, and high water pressure hits it in there and cleans it all up, and from there it goes through the pulsators, and that's what catches the sapphires.
The sapphires are collected in buckets, which Ray takes home for sorting with a magnetic separator.
And as the material travels out along this little conveyor belt, the ironstone sticks to it and gets dragged back underneath, and the sapphires and any other material, quartz and stuff like that, goes forwards, of course falls into the front bucket.
The rough sapphires are separated by hand from any other materials, and then further sorted for size and color. Then it's off to Bangkok for cutting.
We cut them into 8 or 10 different shapes and sizes. Emerald cut, baguette, marquee, oval, round, princess square, trilliant, virtually any shape. And in all the sizes from 2 millimetres up to 6 or 8 millimetres, so all shapes, all sizes, yeah.
Once the stones are cut, they're calibrated for size and sent to jewelers around the world. Anarchy may be the largest sapphire field in the world, but it's no longer the most prolific. The majority of high-quality blue and fancy-colored sapphires are now being discovered in even more exotic locations.
The main supply of sapphires in the world at the moment are coming from places like Madagascar, are very bright blue and very well sought after on the market.
In 1998, significant deposits of high-quality corundum were found in the town of Ilakaka. The discovery sparked a mining frenzy, swelling the population from 40 people to thousands of hopeful prospectors. The African island is only 225,000 square miles, but it's a gemologist's dream come true.
Madagascar is like one of these great treasure troves that has really hit the scene in the last decade, producing new gemstone after new gemstone.
Located on the gem-saturated Mozambique orogenic belt, emeralds, garnets, tourmalines, chrysoberyls, alexandrites, aquamarines, and sapphires are all found here. But the most recent discovery was in 2001, when rubies were found in the sprawling shanty town of Moramanga.
So you tend to have rubies found in places that are associated with mountain chains. So the kinds of places that rubies are mined are often quite inhospitable. You know, the environment is difficult.
Here, mining methods are rudimentary at best. Hand digging shafts and panning in the streams is as technical as it gets, but it means everyone, rich or poor, can join in.
You see these people work so hard, digging in there with primitive tools, and this is the way it is. It's the same process now as it was thousands of years ago, and everywhere in between. The same process of these groups of people in there digging in these little pits in these mining areas and hopefully finding something.
Not so easy. It's not mechanized in the same way as diamond mining or some are gold mining. It's still a hit and miss. You could be 10 feet off. You could be 6 feet off and not even find the vein. And it's very risky and it takes a lot of work.
On the muddy banks of streams, locals work in small teams to collect and pan through buckets of ruby-rich dirt. Nearby, men are digging holes 8 feet down and 2 feet wide. When they reach the wash level, they dig the dirt out laterally with picks and shovels. It's tough work for hopes of a big payoff. Rough stones are cleaned and brought into the town where the townsfolk lend a hand sorting them into piles of color and size. Malagasy rubies tend to be purplish red to very dark red and are generally quite small. However, some areas have produced rough transparent crystals yielding faceted pieces as large as 12 carats. These specimens usually contain inclusions of zircon or rutil.
Fine quality ruby in large sizes is very hard to come by.
In such a gem-rich area, it's a wonder there are no large commercial operations. But the terrain discourages any large machinery from being brought in.
Madagascar is really rough. It's really rough. And when people think rough, this is like really rugged to go there.
To get to Moramanga from the capital of Antananarivo, it's a day of driving, followed by a full day of bushwhacking through the dense jungle.
These stones, by and large, come from very remote and exotic areas, places like the Andes Mountains in South America and Colombia, Madagascar, Mozambique, Burma, Sri Lanka. They're very remote, a lot of times in a jungly region.
Foreign gem dealers who come to Madagascar do not venture into the remote mining towns. Instead, they work from trading huts that are established in major townships like Andalamena. Miners from Moramanga and other boom towns trek in and out daily, trading gems for cash. But Madagascar isn't the only country blessed with such a dizzying array of treasures. Tucked away in the hills of eastern Brazil lies the bustling town of Nova Era. Mining for emeralds began here in the 1960s with no signs of slowing down.
I've been in the mines in Brazil, the emerald mines in Brazil, where seeing the schist come out of the ground, the dirt coming out of the ground, and you see emerald crystals. This is just like fresh out of the ground like that. It's pretty amazing.
Antonio Raimundo dos Santos works a mine outside Nova Era. It's a typical setup. Workers are lowered down a narrow shaft on a makeshift wooden seat. 300 feet below, a low-ceiling tunnel fitted with cart tracks awaits. light bulbs are strung along one side to provide light for the workers who tamp sticks of dynamite into the walls. It's muddy, dark, and dangerous.
We find the veins, then we detonate them. Then after you finish detonating them, you check to see if there is anything. Then if there is, the guys gather them and bring them up here.
Up on the surface, other workers winch cauldrons of dirt up from below and empty them onto the ground. Rocks are divided up by size for sorting. It's extremely physical work, but when a 330-carat rough emerald like this one is unearthed, fatigue gives way to jubilation.
All the guys get really excited. Holy Mary, it is such a joy to everybody. All the workers, mainly the owner. He gets really excited when he can get it. It is such a joy. To use it is victory.
Along the outskirts of Nova Era, the mine also employs people to pan for emeralds.
Some days I find a lot, and some days I find nothing. It's just good today. It is hard work to keep bending down and straightening up. At night, it is not fun.
The rough crystals are collected and transported to towns such as Nova Era for inspection, grading, and cutting. Like diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and emeralds are graded on the 4 C's: color, clarity, cut, and carat weight. But unlike diamonds, there's only one C that really counts: color.
In the world of colored stones, color is the most important thing. So if you have a ruby or an emerald, whatever, that is exceptional color, that's the most important thing, and other factors become less important.
Gemstones come in every color of the spectrum, but rubies, sapphires, and emeralds have set the standard for the very best hues of red, blue, and green.
Being able to see a slight difference in shade, for instance, in a Burma ruby, can make the difference between a ruby that's $500 a carat or $5,000 a carat. Everything else is equal. And subtle shades are worth a great deal of money because Mother Earth doesn't make that shade of color combined with that clarity, combined with that size very often. So it's an indicator of rarity. And it really indicates the value of the gemstone. Color is everything in colored stones.
When evaluating color, there are 3 things to consider: hue, tone, and saturation.
With gems, or with anything that we judge color with, we're judging hue, which is red, and we're judging tone, which is, in the gem world, is graded from 1 to 10, so going from basically a light, almost colorless to a dark, almost black, and grays in between. And then we have saturation, and the saturation would be the amount of actual color that exists.
To the average person, one emerald might look the same as the next, but in the eyes of a gem connoisseur, the slightest degree of contrast in tone or saturation can alter the gem's value dramatically.
It really is one of the areas where technology has not replaced expertise. Personal expertise. I think it would be akin to someone that's an art connoisseur, someone that's at the top of their game in the art world. You can't expect a machine to look at a painting and know what that person knows from their experience. It's very similar with gemstones.
Fine Colombian emeralds, for example, are bright green with a very faint hint of blue, earning top dollar per carat on the market, while Zambian emeralds are deep bluish green with exceptionally high clarity. And some Brazilian specimens are green that's slightly tinted with yellow. Burmese rubies are so superior in color, they're known as Burma red and are likened to the color of pigeon's blood. At market, they can fetch twice as much as any other color of rubies.
This term pigeon blood red, which is not really a technical term, more of a marketing term. It's come to mean the best color of red that can be found in rubies.
Some gems have more than one color, which also affects grading.
Anisotropic gemstones, when the light splits in 2 rays and follows different directions, the absorption and therefore the color of CERN in each one of those directions may be different. And there are gemstones that may show 2 colors.
In a sapphire, one angle might show a vivid blue, but turn it over and it might have a purple or green in it. Some rubies show different reds at different angles.
It is in the skill of the cutter again to, before deciding how he or she is going to cut the stone, to orient it so that it will show the best color face up.
Light source can also affect the color you see in a stone. Color trueness in different types of light affects the desirability of a stone and therefore its value.
A beautiful blue in all lighting environments can cause a stone to sell for much more than one that looks fabulous in this light, but then you go inside and it's more purpley blue.
Trace elements inside gems create dazzling colors, but too much of an element can cause a myriad of other problems.
Unfortunately, with emeralds and rubies, very often the element or the trace impurity that gives it the color, the fine color, which is usually chromium, is the same element that stresses the stone.
During formation, atoms of chromium replace atoms of aluminum of the host crystal for both rubies and emeralds. Once the gem is unearthed, the chromium absorbs all the wavelengths of light except those we perceive as either red or green. But too much chromium will make the ruby or emerald brittle, and it can break.
It's a double-edged sword when you're dealing, particularly it seems, with chromium. Chromium, again, can also be a growth inhibitor for ruby. That's why it's very rare to see 2, 3, 4 carat, gemmy, transparent, vivid red rubies. They're yielding prices now hundreds of thousands of dollars per carat right now because of that factor. Ruby's very unique when you compare it to a lot of other gemstones.
The carat weight of colored gemstones is also important, but often misunderstood.
The actual weight of diamond, for example, is lighter than ruby and sapphire and heavier than an emerald. So if you had 3 stones that all weighed 1 carat, a 1 carat ruby, a 1 carat emerald, and a 1 carat diamond, and they were all cut in the exact same shape and at the same proportions, the ruby or sapphire would look almost 25% smaller than the diamond, and the emerald will look larger than the diamond.
No matter what the carat weight, an expert cut can add tremendous value to any sized gem. It's what makes the stone come to life. Colored gems are usually mined in one country and are sent to another for cutting. Thailand's tradition of cutting sapphires and rubies dates back centuries.
A lot of the sapphire and ruby are cut in Thailand. But there are cutting centers all over the world, but the bulk of those will be cut in those areas.
In the case of emeralds, Brazil is one country that has become known for both its rich mines and highly skilled cutters. In the town of Nova Era, lapidary Saulo Miranda cuts up to a dozen emeralds a day.
My favorite stone to work and cut is the emerald, because I was practically born in an emerald site.
Here, emerald cutting techniques are passed down from generation to generation.
My uncles and parents worked with the emerald, so this is a stone I have always been around, since I was little and I learned how to cut.
Emeralds are so difficult to cut. Saulo must consider many factors before starting work on a new piece of rough.
For you to start cutting a stone, you will weigh it to see how you will use the stone, and then you will see where you will saw. If you have inclusions, where you will draw the saw to see the position you will form. You have to analyze the position of color, the crystallization, for you to give it shape.
Of all the shapes into which an emerald is cut, there is one that is by far the most popular. In fact, it's named after the gem, the emerald cut.
It gets its name because the shape of the crystal, the emerald crystal itself, lends itself to that shape. You can almost see a box inside a box inside a box, and it can create a very lively stone.
The emerald is a stone that you cannot waste. A good stone must be used to its maximum, so that you can earn more in terms of carats.
In fact, most of the time, colored gems are cut to emphasize or highlight their natural crystal structure.
Sapphires and rubies, because of the way the rough occurs, are usually cut in what we call a cushion cut, which is sort of think of a cushion as a round with squared corners, or a square with rounded corners.
After gemstones are cut, they are often treated to enhance their natural character and beauty. Emeralds are typically treated with an oil or resin to fill fractures and hide surface imperfections.
Emeralds are routinely oiled to enhance their beauty. It's not improving their color, it's improving the clarity. And this is going back to the times of Cleopatra. It's actually noted that emeralds were actually oiled to make them more beautiful. So it is a very standard routine practice for emeralds.
By putting a colorless oil into those cracks, it provides a medium through which the light now doesn't stop and get scattered, it travels through. So it eliminates that whitishness. So you can actually more accurately and precisely grade the most important factor affecting the value, the color.
But oiling emeralds is just one age-old treatment. Sapphires and rubies benefit from heat treatment. Inside the earth, extremely high temperatures are crucial to gemstone formation. So heat treatment is like a continuation of that natural process. In Queensland, Australia, where the majority of sapphires are a dark inky blue, Peter Brown uses heat to treat rough crystals in his lapidary workshop.
So these are sapphires that I've decided need the heat treatment to lighten some of them and then to take the silk out of some of the other ones, all the different colours. We put them in a little sapphire crucible or corundum crucible. And then they go into the oven, which is a heat treating process that goes up to 1400 to 1600 degrees Celsius over an 8-hour period. So they reach the maximum temperature for maybe an hour and they cool down. So it's an overnight process in the oven.
A special computer program controls internal temperatures inside the oven. If the critical temperature is not maintained during the heating process, the sapphires can crack.
The inclusions will heat up and expand at a different rate than the ruby that holds them or the sapphire that hold them. And that may cause the inclusions to open up fractures within the ruby.
Although heat treatment of gemstones is common practice, it can affect price and should always be disclosed at the point of sale. Fine quality, untreated sapphires, rubies, and emeralds are very rare, command much higher prices, and should always come with a gem testing report.
As gemologists, we have to be able to identify if a gemstone has been treated, because so many gemstones are treated today.
These days, it's exceptionally rare to find a beautiful faceted ruby, sapphire, or emerald that is untreated.
Without modern-day heat treatment, none of us would have a job in the jewelry industry. There would not be enough rubies and sapphires to meet any of the demand that exists on Earth today. One reason that you can go in a jewelry store in any major city in the world and buy colored stone jewelry with rubies and sapphires is because modern-day heat treatment. Rubies, unheated rubies and unheated sapphires are so rare, without that, only the wealthiest people on Earth could afford them.
So if a buyer wants a stone of high color and clarity with fewer zeros on the price tag, a heat-treated ruby or sapphire is a fantastic and affordable choice. The elements, minerals, and geological conditions required to form gemstones so rarely occur together within nature. It's a miracle gemstones form at all. Current deposits will only get smaller as they are mined. And once a deposit is completely gone, new deposits may never be found.
My suggestion is, if you see a nice stone, get it, because you never know where that's going to be in the future. Those pockets dry up.
Emeralds especially are very rare, and eventually the deposits will run out. The highest quality sapphire deposit ever found has already disappeared, which has greatly affected price.
Most people have heard maybe of the name of cashmere sapphires. Well, they were discovered around 1900 in Kashmir, India, and within a very short period of time, Within 2-3 years, that mine was depleted. But what it produced was some of the most spectacular, world-famous sapphires that have never been seen again. No other area in that region, no other gemstone, no other sapphire deposit in the world has produced a sapphire of that color or clarity or quality.
Of all the colors of corundum available, ruby red is by far the rarest. Fine quality rubies are steadily becoming scarcer. Although recent discoveries like the ones in Madagascar will help bolster the supply for a while, the overall world supply will continue to diminish. But recent scientific breakthroughs have offered an alternative. In 1902, French chemist Auguste Verneuil perfected the flame fusion process, a quick and easy way of creating synthetic gem boules or crystals.
Flame fusion is a method that essentially is melting the chemical components that make corundum. You have an oxygen-hydrogen torch that is heating a chamber through which powdered, in the case of corundum, aluminum oxide, drops with the dopant of chromium or titanium and iron to give the color. And that melt falls as droplet on a cylinder and it envelopes the cylinder. And the cylinder is lowered as the boule grows.
Within hours, a synthetic ruby or sapphire can be grown using flame fusion. But there are disadvantages.
Those boules are under stress because they crystallize pretty fast. So typically they break in half lengthwise. So the maximum size of the gem that you're going to get is given by half the size of the boule.
There are several other ways to create higher quality corundum. One is flux growth, which imitates metamorphic conditions inside the earth where gemstones form naturally. Flux-grown rubies and sapphires are very high quality and typically run several $100s per carat.
You can get fabulous color in a flawless gemstone. And that color with that degree of flawlessness virtually never happens in Mother Nature. If it does, those are the gems that cost hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. But in a synthetic, like a synthetic emerald, you can have the best color imaginable in a totally flawless crystal, which just doesn't happen in Mother Nature.
Another method for creating almost flawless gems uses water.
Other methods to make synthetic gems are hydrothermal methods where instead of using a melt, the nutrients are dissolved in watery solutions and they are the crystal growth from a seed. So in some cases, the seed can be still identified in the grown crystal, and it is in the skill of the cutter not to use the portion of the crystal that has the seed, so that is hidden.
Both the flux and hydrothermal methods have produced beautiful gems, but just like natural gems, quality comes at a price.
The flux techniques and the hydrothermal techniques produce the more expensive type of synthetics because they more resemble the way in which nature works and take far more time. Whereas by flame fusions, a boule can be grown in hours. It may take, months to grow hydrothermal gemstone.
Some synthetic gems so perfectly mimic the real deal, it can take a lot of effort to identify the differences.
I bought one of the finest 3-carat Burma rubies in the world. It was superb. And I had a client that wanted to buy it, but it was under the condition that it had a lab certificate with it saying that it was Burmese ruby and it was natural. I sent it off to the lab and he said he needed to have it for quite a while. I asked him what the problem was and he said, I'm having a tough time determining whether it's genuine or not. Now, after you spend a lot of money and you hear that, you really start to worry. And he said, we're gonna shoot an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer on that and see if we can determine if there are trace minerals there that are found in Burma. And sure enough, after several days and me with sleepless nights, I found out that it was in fact a natural gemstone. But it took several people working at all the major labs to determine whether it was man-made or natural.
As major gem testing labs have developed new testing methods, the line between natural and synthetic is less murky. The greatest challenge for the synthetic industry has not been the manufacturing process. It has been in gaining acceptance by gem connoisseurs who want to know their gemstone was formed naturally over billions of years with no help from man.
A gemstone synthetic is a gem that's been made in a laboratory. It wasn't mined, it wasn't made by Mother Nature deep within the earth 100 million years ago. It was made by a laboratory, perhaps in China, 2 weeks ago. That's the difference. But chemically, optically, and physically, it is a ruby. It's not a fake, it is a ruby. But what's a ruby like that worth compared to that $1 million ruby that was found, the best ruby found in the last 5 years out of Mogok, Burma? That's the difference.
Rubies, sapphires, and emeralds are considered precious because they are beautiful, durable, and most of all, rare. As time goes on, scientists will likely continue to find more inexpensive and faster ways to recreate in the lab what Mother Nature took eons to produce. But whether the product is of science or nature, like the kings and pharaohs of ancient times, mankind will always value the alluring beauty and timeless elegance of a precious gem.